Welcome to the Weekly Roar, coming live from the Lion's Den, helping new managers become great leaders and awesome bosses. And now, here's your host, Greg Storch.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining me today. Welcome to the Weekly Roar. I'm Greg Storch, owner of Lion Enterprise, host of the Weekly Roar, and the founder of a worldwide Bardard coaching program called The Helping Hand. I'm a certified professional leadership coach and a certified leadership speaker and trainer. Now, today I'm sharing tip number 2 for new leaders. Good leaders are lifelong learners. They don't stop and coast once they reach the top, and there's a reason why they shouldn't. So let's get started with tip number 2. Pursue your passion for learning. My mentor, John C. Maxwell, told me that a leader is one who knows the way, shows the way, and goes the way. But leaders can't do that without continually learning and growing, can they? Leaders are also responsible for the development of other leaders. And part of that responsibility is setting the example for new leaders to emulate. People do what people see. And if they see their leader dedicating time to self-development and personal growth, then they're going to do the same. Success breeds success. Now, I'm sure you've heard of the difference between a fixed mindset and a growth mindset, right? See, a growth mindset is an attitude and a belief that people can develop their talents, their abilities, and even their intelligence. It basically means that you believe success comes from the consistent effort of working through challenges and learning and growing. Now, leaders with a growth mindset tend to focus more on the process rather than just the outcome. Now, on the other hand, a fixed mindset is a belief that our basic qualities, like our intelligence and our talents, are fixed traits that can't be changed or developed, so they don't put any thought or effort into that. Now, leaders who have a fixed mindset are results-oriented type people, and sometimes it can even be to the extreme. They tend to interpret challenges as failures, and then they believe that a result of the failure, all efforts were wasted, instead of recognizing it as an opportunity to learn and grow. So when I say that good leaders are learners, what I mean is that they're always on the outlook for some new area of personal growth. The minute we think that we know all there is to know and stop learning and growing, we start to roll backwards. You know what they say when it comes to personal growth, right? If you aren't growing, you're dying. The fact is, personal growth and continuous learning is how we raise our leadership lid. And when we raise our own leadership lid, it raises the lid for others who are following us. Look, the fact is, nothing remains the same. And if you do, then you will quickly become outdated. You know, technology is a great example. It takes a person interested in not only their personal growth, but continuous learning to stay up with the times, doesn't it? Failing to stay up with changes as a leader is like having a grandparent from the Great Depression era trying to teach someone else how to use a smartphone. If they haven't kept up with it, they won't be able to do that. That's why it's important that leaders continue to stretch themselves and grow personally and professionally. It gives us the ability to innovate and change and also to set the example for others. It gives us the ability to think ahead and see more and before everyone else does. So you get the idea. And that's why this is a tip that I always give to new leaders. I want them to understand the importance of having a growth plan and dedicating themselves to continuous learning. Now that we understand why it's important, let me share a few ways that you can not only create a growth mindset, but nurture one as well. So some of the most effective leaders have this in common, a growth mindset. So if you want to follow in their footsteps, here are the beliefs and practices that you should take on board as well. Okay, now this first one might be super obvious, but the first thing that we have to do if we want to foster a growth mindset is we need to have the ability to embrace change. When we embrace change instead of fearing it, we can position ourselves in a way that we're ready to drive the changes that are needed. That can mean changing ourselves or our teams or changing the systems and processes that we create. It can mean even changing our vision. Without the ability to embrace change, we won't see the need to continue to learn and grow. There's this quote that we read to our transitioning service members as we're preparing them to leave the military and return to the civilian life. And it goes like this: embrace the journey, embrace the change. Growth doesn't come from things staying the same. Now, if you want to truly be on a path of personal growth, you got to know where you're at right now, right? So this is the second thing that we need to do, and that's to get some self-awareness. Where's our starting point? What's our baseline? Because if we don't know that, how are we going to measure our growth, right? Having self-awareness as a leader helps us to be better equipped to make those meaningful decisions and explore opportunities for growth. But more importantly, it helps us find out where we need help, the things we don't know, and the things we aren't good at. Once we know that, we know where to dedicate our attention to personal growth. The third thing that we have to be ready and willing to do is we got to be ready to disrupt the status quo. Good leaders are ready to step in and change things that aren't working for them, even if they've already become a habit. See, the thing is, we don't want change to happen to us. When change is forced on us, we'll always be behind the eight ball trying to play catch up. You know, I saw this all the time in the IT industry with major changes in technology. The leaders who failed to adapt early were blindsided by disruptive technology, and they spent their whole time struggling to catch up and make the change. But when we're out in front and leading the change, we become leaders driving the innovation, not being replaced by it. When we dedicate ourselves to constant learning and growth, when the game changes, we're ready and we become the game changers. If you think you might need to interrupt your patterns and habits to get ready for change and develop a growth mindset, you can ask yourself things like this: what habits and routines in my life need to be changed up a bit? Am I still doing things that used to work, but they don't anymore? Where am I spending my time? And are those activities I'm doing productive or unproductive? When we become intentional to interrupt ourselves, we plant the seeds of change, and what you'll reap is the ability to develop a growth mindset. Now, you've heard me say this before, but it bears repeating here because there really is no better teacher for us to learn from than failure. That's right. And as my friend Amy Burkett calls it, that dirty little F word. But when we recognize the value of learning and failure, we can change, learn, and grow. You know, failure is inevitable, whether it's in life or in business. But leaders who learn from their mistakes and add those lessons into their personal toolbox are better positioned for learning and growing. When it comes to organizations and cultures, my friend David McGlennon will tell you that it's important for leaders to create a culture in their organizations where failure is seen as a learning tool and it's embraced. When we foster that culture of failing forward, it helps us develop the leaders around us by encouraging them to grow and take risks by abandoning their fear of failure. The last tip I give to new leaders about their growth and continuous learning is that I stress the importance of patience and perseverance. P squared. Do you think an oak tree grows 40 feet tall overnight? Of course not. And the same holds true when it comes to our own growth. It requires time, a lot of time. And so patience and perseverance are key traits to foster in a new leader. Learning to push through failure, treat obstacles as challenges, and persist despite difficult situations allows us to lead others to successful outcomes, to achieve visions. It's how dreams come true. To lead others to success, we as leaders have to model that behavior that we want to see in the people we're leading. We have to be the example of how to foster the right mindset for success. And it starts with a growth mindset. It begins when we can break free from the bonds of fixed beliefs and limited potential. When we consciously accept the practices and beliefs of a growth mindset, we open doors of possibilities, and we can do it without being held back by the fear of failure. Now, I'm going to leave you with this quote by T.S. Eliot, who said, "Only those who will risk going too far can possibly find out how far one can go." Okay, so that's tip 2. Pursue your passion for learning. Leaders are learners, period. It's how we grow and stay out in front to lead. And now you have some things you can do to make sure you challenge the status quo and either stay on the path or get back on it, to fostering a growth mindset and developing the perseverance to dedicate yourself to a life of learning. Remember, first, we have to be willing to embrace change. We have to also have some self-awareness of where we are right now so we know what we need to change. Once we do, we have to be willing to challenge the status quo, don't we? Knowing what we need to change is one thing, but taking the action on making the change is what makes the difference. So don't forget to also recognize the lessons in your failures. It's the best way to learn from experience. And of course, the last thing, don't forget to have some patience with yourself. It's not what we do in a day, but what we do daily that makes the difference. All right, friends, that's it for today. Thanks again for joining me today. And don't forget to join me next week for tip number 3 as we continue this countdown to my 200th episode of the Weekly Roar. Now, until we meet again, remember, be powerful, but stay poised just like a lion. Bye, everybody.
Thanks for watching the Weekly Roar live event at lionenterprise.com. If you enjoyed this video, please tell others to join us each week here in the Lion's Den. Thanks again, and see you next week.